On a chilly morning in Buenos Aires back in August of 1952, thousands of people poured onto the streets in a river of grief. Some held tattered photographs. Others clutched handwritten notes they'd never get to deliver. From rooftops and balconies, people tossed flowers onto the swelling crowds below. It was like all of Argentina came to a standstill, united in sorrow for the woman they called Evita. And here's a fact that might surprise you. For days on end, mourners waited in lines that stretched for miles, each person determined to file past her coffin and pay final respects. Many fainted in the heat or were treated for raw dehydration, yet almost nobody left the line. That's the level of devotion Eva Perón inspired, a devotion that still captivates us decades after her passing. How did a poor girl from a rural town end up shaping not just Argentine politics, but also capturing the imaginations of people around the globe? Her story is one of staggering ambition, passionate love, bitter controversy, and above all, an unbreakable bond with the common people. In some ways, she was a celebrity bigger than Hollywood could ever provide, but ironically, her journey did have its roots in acting, one step on her remarkable path toward becoming a cultural icon. To understand Eva Perón, or Evita, as she is fondly known, it helps to glimpse the world into which she was born. Argentina in the early 1900s was a land of stark contrasts. Grand mansions dotted the boulevards of Buenos Aires, built by landowning families made wealthy from cattle ranching and agriculture. Yet away from the city's glittering avenues, poverty remained widespread. Poor families in rural areas or the city's slums faced a near impossible climb to a better life. Rigid social class barriers made it rare for someone of humble origins to rise, let alone become a national figure. In this environment, those who were outside the social elites often dreamed of stardom, be it on stage, radio, or the fledgling film industry, as a path to respect and security. Eva Perón was born Maria Eva Duarte on May 7, 1919, near the small village of Los Toldos in Argentina's Pampas region. Her father, Juan Duarte, was a wealthy landowner with another family, which made Eva and her siblings illegitimate in the eyes of Argentine society. This stigma was cruelly reinforced when Eva was a child. On one occasion, legend has it, she was reportedly turned away from her father's funeral by his legitimate relatives. Whether the details are precisely true or not, this moment, repeated in countless retellings, symbolizes the deep sense of injustice Eva felt growing up. She didn't just experience poverty. She felt the shame that society heaped on families like hers. Those memories carved a lasting wound in her spirit and fueled her determination to overturn the barriers that had made her mother and siblings virtual outcasts. Her mother, Juana Ibarguren, was a hard-working woman who took in laundry, cooked, and sewed to keep her children fed. The whole Duarte family lived in a simple household, sometimes struggling just to scrape by. In her early years, Eva attended local schools, but she was by no means an academic standout. She was far more taken by stories of glamorous stars on stage and screen, immersing herself in daydreams about life beyond the dusty roads of Los Toldos. Family friends would later recall Eva's habit of hanging pictures of famous Argentine actresses on her wall, as though she were already declaring to the universe that she belonged in that circle. Around the house, she would practice dramatic readings from magazines or recite lines she'd heard on the radio. It was an escape, maybe even a coping mechanism, but it was also a seed of ambition that she nurtured from a young age. By her early teenage years, Eva had become restless. The mismatch between her modest surroundings and her flamboyant dreams grew starker every day. She was said to be especially enthralled by radio dramas that aired from Buenos Aires, a bustling metropolis with theaters, movie houses, and performance troupes. In 1935, at the age of 15, Eva took the bold step of leaving home. One common version of the story is that she caught a ride with a traveling tango singer who promised to introduce her to people in the capital. Others say she saved up the modest income she'd earned from small gigs or menial jobs and simply boarded a bus. Whichever version you believe, it's clear that she arrived in Buenos Aires with next to nothing. No money, no influential friends, and certainly no guarantee of success. In the mid-1930s, Buenos Aires was becoming a magnet for aspiring performers. The Great Depression had rippled around the world, leaving entire communities desperate for employment. Yet in the city, radio stations were hiring actors and announcers for dramas and variety shows. Film studios were experimenting with local productions, and theaters were always seeking new talent. Even so, Eva discovered that making it in show business was far from easy. Her first few years in Buenos Aires were characterized by small roles in radio soap operas, walking on in theater productions, where her name might not even appear in the program, and a constant hustle to be noticed. She would share cramped, cheap rooming houses with other young women, some also aspiring actresses, others simply working in shops or as secretaries, all of them chasing a better life. It wasn't glamorous, but Eva showed unwavering determination. She was known among acquaintances for her relentless drive. If a show's casting director dismissed her on Monday, she'd be back on Tuesday, politely reminding them of her desire to work. If that same director said, "We have no roles for you," she'd ask for a chance to sweep floors just to hang around the theater. This persistence gradually paid off in small increments. One by one, she landed better parts in radio dramas, building a reputation as someone who could infuse a role with genuine emotion. By the early 1940s, Eva became a staple on certain radio stations, voicing everything from historical figures to romantic heroines. She also found a foothold in a handful of B-list Argentine films, though her film career didn't skyrocket in the same way her radio presence did. Still, Eva was learning an invaluable skill in the process: connecting with audiences. The emotional resonance she could bring to a character, especially a suffering heroine, showed an intuitive grasp of how to pull listeners into a story. This gift would serve her in ways she couldn't have possibly predicted. At the same time, she began to meet people of influence: producers, journalists, business owners, and even a few politicians who mingled in creative circles. She discovered she could hold her own in conversation, especially when the topic involved current events or social issues. Contrary to some portrayals that reduce her to a mere beauty in search of the spotlight, those who knew her around this time remarked on her intelligence and sense of mission, as though she already sensed a higher calling than just acting. By 1943, Argentina found itself in a period of political upheaval. The country had long been torn between conservative forces representing the elite and emerging populist movements that promised a fairer deal for the working classes. Out of this turbulent environment, a new leader surfaced, Colonel Juan Domingo Peron. He was a rising figure in the military government, but also had a keen interest in social welfare, labor rights, and the plights of the poor. One event that set the stage for his meeting with Eva was a catastrophic earthquake that struck the province of San Juan in 1944, killing thousands. Peron, serving as Secretary of Labor at the time, organized a massive charity drive in the capital to raise funds for the survivors. He invited entertainers, business executives, and high society patrons to put on a gala, complete with performances and speeches, to generate support for the devastated region. It was at this charity event that Eva Duarte is believed to have met Colonel Peron. Depending on which account you read, the meeting was either carefully orchestrated, Eva was, after all, forging connections for her radio career, or completely spontaneous, a matter of a certain glow in the crowd that brought them face to face. Regardless, they clicked instantly. Eva, at 24, was drawn to Peron's confidence and his vision for a more just society. Peron, in his late 40s, was captivated by the radiance of this young actress, who seemed to embody both grace and determination. The spark of romance was immediate, and they soon became nearly inseparable. Within months, Eva moved in with Peron, a decision that raised eyebrows in conservative Argentine society. But the couple didn't much care about the gossip. By 1945, Peron's political prospects were taking off, but so were the suspicions of rival leaders. He was briefly detained by military factions who opposed his growing popularity among the working class. In a dramatic turn of events, massive demonstrations broke out on October 17, 1945, as workers, known as descamisados, or shirtless ones, flooded the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires, demanding Peron's release. By this point, Eva was already recognized as a prominent champion of Peron's cause, using her radio programs to stir sympathy for him. The protesters prevailed, Peron was freed, and in a matter of days he announced his bid for the presidency. He and Eva married not long after, formalizing a partnership that was both romantic and deeply political. In June 1946, Peron was elected president of Argentina, with a decisive mandate from the working class. Overnight, Eva Duarte became Eva Perón, the First Lady of the nation. She was only 27, but she jumped into her new role with remarkable energy. Where many First Ladies might have been content to handle ceremonial duties, Eva stepped onto the front lines of political advocacy. Drawing on her talents as a performer and communicator, she gave impassioned speeches, visited factories to talk with laborers, and traveled throughout the country to see firsthand what the poor and marginalized needed. She also launched the Maria Eva Duarte de Peron Foundation, often simply called the Eva Perón Foundation, to provide direct aid, food, clothing, housing, and even scholarships for young people. Within a few years, the foundation's budget ballooned into the millions, distributing resources more quickly and sometimes more generously than government agencies. Eva also championed women's suffrage. She believed that if Argentine women had the right to vote, the entire political landscape would shift more in favor of social justice. In 1947, partly due to her advocacy, women finally won the right to vote in Argentina. Eva's involvement in this victory sparked both gratitude and controversy. Her supporters praised her as a modernizing force for women's rights, while her detractors claimed she was using the suffrage movement to strengthen her husband's political base. Still, the result was undeniable. In the 1951 elections, women voted in large numbers for the first time, significantly shaping the country's political future. Behind these public achievements, however, was a woman under immense strain. Eva's health began deteriorating as early as 1950. She suffered from chronic pain, collapsed at public events, and was rumored to have fainting spells even while giving her famously fiery speeches. Friends say she brushed off concerns, attributing her exhaustion to the pace of her duties. But behind the scenes, she was receiving medical treatments and trying to keep the severity of her condition a secret. Meanwhile, controversy dogged her every step. The Argentine elite despised her for her humble origins and resented her power in shaping policy. Some newspapers ridiculed her transformation from actress to political figure, suggesting she was orchestrating a theatrical show rather than serving the nation. Others accused her foundation of misusing funds or of forcing wealthy families to donate. Rumors spread that she had stashed away hidden fortunes in European bank accounts. None of these allegations were conclusively proven, but the stories never quite died down. One of the biggest turning points in her political life came in 1951, when a movement within Peron's party urged Eva to run for vice president in the upcoming elections. For a short, intense period, it looked like Argentina might have a woman in the second highest office of the land, a radical prospect at the time. Crowds of workers marched under banners reading Evita for vice president, chanting her name outside the presidential palace. The military, however, balked at the idea of a female vice president, especially one with so much influence over the public. High-ranking officers voiced strong opposition, and even some within Peron's government worried that Eva's candidacy would spark constitutional crises. Ultimately, amid intensifying pressure, Eva publicly renounced her candidacy on August 31st, 1951, citing her duty to the shirtless ones over personal ambition. She withdrew in a tearful radio address, one that reportedly moved many working-class people to tears themselves. Behind the scenes, though, there was another factor at play: her health. Eva had been diagnosed with advanced cervical cancer, though exact details remained closely guarded. Despite the best medical care available, her condition worsened. By early 1952, she had grown pale and frail, losing weight rapidly. Yet, she refused to step away from public life, continuing to speak at events, often in a wheelchair or aided by painkillers. She was only in her early 30s, and many who saw her in that final year described an almost spiritual aura about her. A woman determined to push forward, even if it meant sacrificing her own well-being for what she believed was a bigger cause. Eva Perón passed away on July 26, 1952, at the age of 33. At the moment of her death, radio stations across the country interrupted their programming to announce the tragedy. An entire nation seemed to weep. The news sparked a public outpouring of grief rarely seen in modern times. For weeks, throngs of mourners stood outside the Ministry of Labor building, where her body lay in state. People traveled hundreds of miles, sleeping on sidewalks and sharing meager rations, just to be near her coffin for a few seconds. Many reported that the lines wrapped around blocks and extended for miles, effectively halting normal life in the capital. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands of Argentines filed past her coffin, and millions more followed the event through media coverage. What happened next could be lifted straight from the pages of a dramatic novel. Perón arranged for Eva's body to be embalmed by a renowned Spanish pathologist, Dr. Pedro Ara, aiming to preserve it for public display. Ara spent years meticulously preparing the remains, intending to keep them in a perfect, lifelike condition. Plans were underway to build a grand monument that would rival the Statue of Liberty in scale, where Eva's body would eventually rest. However, a military coup in 1955 overthrew Peron, and the new regime seized Eva's remains. They viewed her embalmed body as a dangerous symbol that could spark renewed devotion to Peronism. After a series of clandestine moves, her coffin was shipped under a false name to a cemetery in Milan, Italy, where she remained buried in secret for over a decade. It wasn't until the early 1970s that her body was exhumed and returned to the Peron family, first to Spain, where Juan Peron was then living in exile, and ultimately to Argentina for a final burial in the Duarte family tomb at the Recoleta Cemetery. The entire saga amplified her almost mythical status, creating legends that further entwined Evita's life and afterlife with the very soul of Argentina. To this day, Eva Perón's legacy is fiercely debated. Some see her as a saintly figure who uplifted the poor, advanced women's rights, and gave voice to the voiceless. Others criticize her for being part of a populist regime that consolidated power and suppressed dissent. Still others question the extent to which her charity was free from corruption, given how donations were sometimes coerced from the wealthy. There's also ongoing discussion about her ideological leanings. While she advocated strongly for social justice, her methods for achieving results often sidestep traditional political structures, relying instead on direct appeals to Juan Peron or on the swift action of her foundation, actions that some labeled autocratic or manipulative. Despite the controversies, what's undeniable is her massive cultural and emotional impact. Her story has been told through Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's musical Evita, which later inspired a Hollywood film adaptation starring Madonna. These retellings, while dramatized, highlight how the arc of Eva's life has resonated far beyond Argentina. She embodied a new archetype, the woman of humble origins who ascends to national power not just by political calculation, but by a deeply personal, emotional connection to the masses. She did this in an age when women were still locked out of nearly all significant governmental roles. Even her critics concede that she had an uncanny ability to communicate with people who felt overlooked. That ability had roots in her training as an actress. She knew how to deliver lines that would stir emotions, how to captivate an audience, and how to frame her own narrative as part of a broader struggle for justice. Her approach to politics, grounded in empathy and direct action, has influenced social movements around the world. Many activists cite Eva as proof that compassion and showmanship can combine to shift cultural norms and pass legislation that might otherwise seem unattainable. In Argentina, her legacy is everywhere, from the numerous social welfare clinics she championed to the statues, paintings, and references on city murals. Even though the political landscape has shifted repeatedly since her time, her name remains a potent force in Argentine identity. Her face graces currency. Her story is required reading in some schools, and her memory is still invoked by politicians trying to channel her bond with the descamisados. For people who are fascinated by Hollywood history, Eva Perón may not have had the conventional star trajectory, nor did she become a household name through blockbusters or silver screen accolades. But her background as a radio and film actress undeniably set the stage for her public persona. She understood the power of performance, the weight of emotional storytelling, and the necessity of forging a heartfelt connection with viewers, or in her case, citizens. If you look at archival footage of her speeches, you can see that same fierce theatrical passion that once drove her to chase roles in Buenos Aires. She essentially performed on the biggest stage possible, the political arena, with millions of everyday people watching, and she performed with extraordinary effect. Looking back, one might wonder if Eva ever really left her career as an actress behind. In many respects, her life after meeting Juan Peron was the role of a lifetime, one in which she believed so completely that she lived it every waking moment. Yet it was more than a show. The social reforms she pushed for had tangible impacts. Her foundation built thousands of homes, funded hospitals, and provided scholarships. She was instrumental in organizing a campaign that led to women's suffrage. These are solid, lasting achievements, not mere rhetoric. Modern audiences might find inspiration in her story for multiple reasons. On one hand, she represents the triumph of a strong-willed woman who refuses to let social barriers dictate her path. On the other, her life invites us to consider the fine line between championing the poor and wielding political power in ways that can stoke division. She was both adored and reviled, an angel to some and a manipulator to others. That tension makes her far more complex than a simple fairy tale heroine. It underscores the reality that iconic figures, whether in Hollywood or politics, often lead lives marked by contradictions. The magnitude of Eva Perón's ambitions and the fervor of her commitments ensured that she would leave no one indifferent. Whether you admire her, criticize her, or find yourself somewhere in between, there's no denying the lasting resonance of her life's journey. Her funeral, with its seemingly endless lines of mourners, stands as one of the most remarkable public expressions of grief in the 20th century, a testament to the depth of feeling she evoked. Even her after-death odyssey, when her embalmed body wandered secretly through Europe before coming home, adds another haunting layer to her legend. As we conclude, perhaps the most meaningful way to reflect on Eva Perón's legacy is to remember that it's partly ours to shape. Every generation revisits her story and sees in it new lessons about social justice, about the potency of charisma, about the limits and possibilities of women in public life, and about the mysterious alchemy that turns an ordinary person into a figure of near mythical stature. We can admire her for her empathy and strength while acknowledging the controversies that swirled around her. We can celebrate her role in empowering women and uplifting the disadvantaged, even as we scrutinize the ways power can be concentrated and wielded. Most of all, we can recognize in Evita's story a reminder of how deeply one individual can imprint upon the collective memory of a nation and even the world when heart, art, and politics converge.